who will address you. She needs no introduction. She is first class. There's no question about that. And when you compare leadership, there's no question in my mind, and I'm sure in the minds of the people who are here, that the Barbados Labour Party has a leader who has the heart of the people in the pit of her stomach. Because when she speaks about the concerns of Barbadians, you understand and you feel the passion from which she delivers. And it is because of that that we have set up the staging of the People's Assembly to give the Barbadian public an opportunity not only to be educated about what is happening, but also to give you, the ordinary Barbadian, an opportunity to have your voice heard as well. So I want to take this opportunity to introduce Mia Amor Mottley, the political leader of the Barbados Labour Party, to the podium to address you tonight.
I know how to play football. Good evening, everyone. Let me first, as usual, thank those who have spoken here this evening. Sandy, your passion last week at Ellerslie was clear, and we felt we had to give you this platform tonight, and your ability to expand on your views of education, I think, has added significant value to the national dialogue. You met Orlando Cox, who left the comfort and safety then, because had he stayed on at CLICO, it would no longer be comfort and safety, but left the comfort and safety of a steady job to break out on his own and to establish a business to make his way, and is able to relate firsthand what has happened to him and his business and his experiences over the course of the last 5 years, and how he has to chop and change to keep his head above water, and the extent to which that puts pressure on him personally and his family. And then, of course, Ryan is no stranger. He was with us at St. Philip Primary School. And I want, in particular, for you to salute Ryan, because I called him on Friday. I called him on Friday because I felt that the public of Barbados needed an explanation of the IMF Article 4 report in language that they could understand. And it is not only the 500 of you here this evening who will have the benefit of Ryan's presentation, but to the gentleman who was complaining about the camera, we needed to record it because there are tens of thousands of Barbadians who need access to it this week, and it will be uploaded from tomorrow. We find ourselves, and that presentation, therefore, was done in the last 48 hours in a language that you could understand and with graphics that you could understand. And it is for that I thank you, Ryan, because we have not paid him. This is public service, and he has taken his time to give so that people in Barbados can understand the nature of the control, the crisis that we face. Jeffrey and Santia, I continue to be pleased with the young members of Parliament of the Barbados Labour Party, and I know that our future is in good hands. I thought that was important that they anchor this meeting tonight because you must have confidence in the future of the Labour Party. There are those who have been there for a while. We will continue to anchor them, not like how Worrell has anchored the government. True anchor. Since 2008, July. You saw Ryan talk about government's taxation policies. That's where the slide started. And the impact that that then had on the disposable income of businesses and households, and the reduced revenue that it then had to government. And then the extent, since government was not taking in money, the central bank had to step in now and help bridge the gap because the government does not want to cut its spending. So the Labour Party has been speaking since July 2008. Clyde, Owen, myself, the rest of the members of Parliament. And we have sang the same song to the same tune over and over and over, to the point where we were ridiculed year after year after year after year after year after year. The independent economists, such as Ryan Strawn and others, have spoken and proffered their view in this country as to where we are, not this year, 2014, not 2013 alone, but since 2010, the independent economists have been telling Barbados and Barbadians we are on a dangerous track. And that message has gotten stronger and stronger and stronger to the point of what you have seen tonight. The regional economists, Terence Farrell from Trinidad, a man who wrote many books with Delisle Worrell, had an article in the Nation newspaper, 4-6 weeks ago. VOB then put him on radio. He has no axe to grind. He looks at the facts. And he tells you that the Barbados economy is in serious danger. The IDB, Inter-American Development Bank, you heard Clyde and Owen and myself talk from since September 2012 about a policy loan that the government was supposed to be getting from the IDB, but the conditionalities were such that the government, to this day, cannot get that loan. And the things that the government spoke about, I well remember at Jerome Walcott's nomination, Owen Arthur reading from that document after Chris Sinclair accused him and Anthony Wood and Tyrone Barker of meeting at UWI to dismiss 10,000 people. And Owen Arthur responded by reading a document that spoke to the IDB, telling the government that they had to reduce wages, wage costs, however which way, and that they had to do a number of other things in relation to public enterprises, statutory corporations. That's all it is: Transport Board, NCC, Water Authority, you know them. And not only has the IDB now spoken, but this week, the International Monetary Fund. And don't be deceived into a sense of comfort because a press release says the government has started to do some things. The truth is that the IMF Article 4 report is the most damning piece of evidence, all 82 pages, that I have seen on the performance of this government and on the outlook of our future. And Ryan has come here tonight to contextualize that for you, because we are facing an 18-wheeler truck bearing down on us, coming at us at 100 miles per hour. And we are standing in the middle of the road, and months are left before the impact takes place. How many more must speak? And if it was not enough that you had the BLP, the independent economists locally, the independent economists regionally, the IDB, the IMF, in comes now a senior government minister, Dr. David Eswick. If you didn't want to believe the Labour Party, if you didn't want to believe the economists like Ryan and Troy Lord and all of the rest, if you didn't want to believe Terence Farrell, if you didn't want to believe the IDB, if you didn't want to believe this week the IMF, when a man from the bosom of the cabinet says your fiscal and monetary policies are wrong, he says blame. Blame will be ascribed to us for introducing social spending when we knew that our revenue was dropping. You don't go on a spending spree when your money getting cut. That is recklessness. And if it is reckless for you, it is more reckless for the government of Barbados, who has a fiduciary responsibility to all of you. So I ask, how many more must speak? And we have now therefore reached a stage where the public of Barbados, but in particular, the interest groups, the private sector, the unions, the church, civil society, the media, nobody can now claim that they do not know that Barbados is in serious crisis. And I want to make the simple point that this is a democracy, and it is people's right to choose. What we have been fighting for as a Labour Party for the last few months is to make sure that the people have the knowledge. You have the knowledge now from multiple sources. And anybody who claims that they do not know what is happening is because they do not want to hear and they do not want to see. And we were all told as children, there is none so blind as those who do not want to see. But we have reached a point where you must now ask yourself, where are the voices of the private sector? Where are the voices of the unions? Where is the voice of the church? And where is the voice of the media? We have established this platform, and I salute the courage of those who have come not as Barbados Labour Party supporters, because there are many who came on this platform who were sworn to be opposed to the Barbados Labour Party for decades. But they mounted the platform. There are many who were neither B, D, G, or F, but they mounted the platform. But what is missing now is the collective voice of those who have the responsibility of leading people in other groupings. And I ask you tonight, is it fear? Is it lack of courage? Is it greed? I ask you, because the greatest ally of this government and the greatest risk to Barbados is now there by the silence and the inaction of those who lead interest groups and who have the ability to influence others in this country. If the only voice that is speaking as a collective is the opposition, then the government feels that they are on the right track because they expect the opposition to speak. That is true. The difference is that the People's Assembly now allow individuals to speak. But do those individuals who mount this assembly speak on behalf of people other than themselves? Ryan doesn't speak for the Barbados Economic Society. Sandy does not speak for the Barbados Association of Principals. Orlando does not speak for the Small Business Association. The tourism people who came do not speak for the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association. The one or two workers' reps who came throughout the course do not speak for the unions of this country. And I say to you now, that if you know that there's an 18-wheel truck bearing down on you, and you know that it is now a matter of months that you have left to get out of the way, that you have taken the one major help through the Credit Suisse loan that you could get, and even with taking that, you're falling down again with 1/3 of what you received gone in 5 weeks at the beginning of the year. Where does that leave this country. And I ask these people that tonight in all conscience, not to criticize anybody, but because Barbados has been good to all of us. Barbados has educated us. Barbados has taken care of our parents in the healthcare system and our children. Barbados takes care of us even now. Barbados has allowed us to leave our windows open and not worry about the level of crime that other Caribbean countries has faced. I said in the past, Barbara, don't get tied up for decades. And don't let me talk out your business. Either in the Pine or in Bashal. Barbados has been good to us. And if Barbados has been good to us, how do we now stand idly by like a painting, not willing to open our mouths? Nobody is talking about insurrection. And the government needs to put that in its pipe and smoke it. But the Constitution of Errol Barrow allowed us the right to speak. Jeffrey spoke about that tonight. And I am saying, Orlando spoke about that tonight. And I am saying to you that the only thing that can guarantee that Barbadians face the worst possible outcome is by Barbadians remaining silent over the next 2 months to 3 months. When we held press conferences last year asking Delisle World, Central Bank, board directors, have you advised the Ministry of Finance that monetary stability in Barbados is endangered, as you are required to do under sections 48 and 49 of the Central Bank Act? Not a word. Mouth zip. Ignore. And not a single person in the private sector, not a single member of the Bankers Association, not a single member of the union movement felt it necessary to say, in truth though, have you advised the Ministry of Finance that monetary stability is endangered? We had to wait for the IMF report this week. At paragraph 34, for the Central Bank of Barbados to admit that not only has it been printing money, but that it agrees it must stop printing the money because of what the IMF has said will be the impact, the continued impact on the reserves of this country. Now I say to you that something has to be fundamentally wrong. When these reserves can drop as low as $850 million under 10 weeks, boosted artificially by a loan, not from earnings, and it is still dropping. And the board of the central bank, I'm not only talking about world now, the board of the central bank does not tell the country whether it has advised the Ministry of Finance that monetary stability is endangered. And the law is very specific, because the law says that the Minister of Finance does have the right to disagree with the central bank. We know that that is hypothetical in this case because Chris Sinclair is a wholly owned subsidiary of Delisle World. Courtney Blackman used to tell us that the governor was a creature of the Minister of Finance. But in this case, the Minister of Finance is a creature of the governor of the central bank. And I regret to be saying so in the Minister of Finance's alma mater, because I know this alma mater has produced other great students. I am not sure what happened to Chris Sinclair. But the point is this, that the law allows the Ministry of Finance to say, I don't agree with the steps that you, central bank, are telling me that I have to put in place to bring this economy, monetary stability back into line. But what it does say is that if the Ministry of Finance, as so important is the role of the central bank, that if the minister says, I think there should be another way, it has to come to Parliament and it has to be gazetted. He can't just whisper. They can't just go to lunch or go up by the Governor House for meals. It has to be put in the official gazette because our laws treat monetary stability in the same way that our laws treat national security. Money is the oxygen in this economy. And if we get the relationship of money wrong, if the role of the central bank cannot be relied upon to protect the stability of our currency, then it cannot protect jobs. We can't protect jobs. We can't protect savings of people. We can't protect the prosperity of a nation. So that it is the linchpin. That is why you saw Ryan have them protecting the goal. It is the anchor. And when we have reached the point where the law imposes such a high obligation, unknown to most other areas in this society and economy, then it is because the lawmakers intended for you to respect it and give respect at a very high level. So I say to you tonight that where are the voices? Because the Bankers Association, more than any others, would appreciate the importance of central bank complying with a report to the Minister of Finance if monetary stability is endangered. The private sector would appreciate it because ultimately it undermines confidence, it influences their access to money, it influences their ability to be able to prosper and to maintain jobs. And by extension, the union needs to get the advice to appreciate it because it affects the jobs of the people who are now paying the union dues to keep the union alive in this country. And the church needs to appreciate it because if all is going well in our day jobs, our spiritual and emotional well-being is affected, and they are to be the guardians of our soul. I take slight comfort, but a little comfort. This morning I attended the Anglican diocesan service at the gymnasium. Cynthia was there with me. Prime Minister was there too. Chief Justice was there too. And the Reverend from St. Luke, who was at the subject of the firestorm a couple weeks ago for attacks on the public servants, made a very interesting point, and he preached a good sermon today, on the principle of renewal. And he ended his sermon by telling the people that the church must be prepared to be political, though not politically mobilized. I agree with him. And that the church must be political because it must be prepared to speak out against injustice and oppression. And that it must, like Moses, be able to say from the pulpit, let my people go. Cynthia was there. And I say to you tonight that I await, therefore, the voice of the church in the tone and language that the pastor of St. Luke's preached to the entire Anglican faith in Barbados today as we go forward. Because whether they are saying it or not, the people who have been chosen to be the primary victims are those who are least capable of being victims, those at the bottom of the working chain, those who are working for $300-400 a week, not because they want to work for $300-400 a week, but because they don't have a choice. Those who have no voice, unless they have the courage of a Delsina who came on this platform and spoke tonight, or an Ivor who spoke last week. Those who have nobody representing them in a vigorous way, saying, cut the other expenditure like David Eswick has told you to do. Eswick has said you shouldn't have spent the money on constituency councils or catering to summer camps or transport fees for school children. And when a senior government minister can tell the government that, in the same way that the Labour Party has been saying it for 3-4 years, how many more must say it before the other voices in this country? The leaders of civil society say enough is enough. Must we be totally flattened to the ground before people find the courage to speak? This is a serious matter. And it is a serious matter because there is a timeline to rescue. Jerome will tell you that if you start an operation or an operation is needed because somebody has literally been stabbed and all the stomach cut up, you can't just say in 10 minutes that that person can get up and walk. The operation takes time. And until such time as the operation is finished, you have to respect the time that it takes to fix the patient, to get the patient better. Ryan will tell you that you can't just say that Barbados needs help to prop up its foreign reserves and you get it next week. It takes time. In Jamaica's case, on this last occasion, it took Jamaica 18 months after Portia won. And that was with an IMF program in place. And they could not get a single cent from the IMF or anyone. IDB, World Bank, commercial banks, everybody was waiting for the deal to be sealed, for the stamp of approval from the IMF. And I say to you tonight, whether it is a homegrown program, or whether it is an IMF program, or whether it is David Eswick's program, because he got his own. The reality is that whatever program it is, we don't wake up tomorrow morning and say we want it and get it by night time. It takes time to put it in place. And if it takes time to put it in place, then we have to ask ourselves every day, if we are not yet taking sufficient action to protect us, do we not have to add the length of time that it would take us to get the protection in place to where we are every day? And I say to you tonight that the minimum time, in my view, is 6 months. So you can't look at February 15th and say this is where the reserves are on February 15th. You have now to add 6 months to February 15th and say, where will they be on September 15th? Because that is the length of time you will be without any help from anybody if you have to go and ask for help. And that is why this government continues to be in problems. It does not understand process. That's why they tell you about 4 seasons every year for 3 years. That's why they tell you about the cruise pair for 2. That's why they tell you about the pair head for more years than that. They believe that they can be a government of pronouncements. I so pronounce, and it happens. They are like Star Trek. Beam me up, Scotty. Instantly it happens. But if only life were so. The truth is that it is not so. And the truth is that the stakes are high. And the truth is we are not playing a monopoly game. And the truth is that the workers who have gone home are human beings. They got children. They got parents. They got obligations. And when you therefore behave in this way, you cause people to feel that you are callous and reckless. You mean, good Lord, the Prime Minister can't even tell us how many people supposed to go home, have gone home, still to go home? And we have to read on the front page of the Nation that the IMF says 1,800 they were told have been fired. But I don't know who tell the IMF 1,800. But the numbers that I count can't reach 1,000 yet. And the point is this. There is nobody in Barbados who should have to be guessing about what the government of Barbados is doing in your name. And furthermore, the Prime Minister needs to tell us that if you're going to send these people home from this department, if you're going to send workers home from the Transport Board, what impact will it have on bus services across Barbados? If you're going to send people home from drainage, what impact will it have on people in Barbados who are usually the victims of flooding and who sometimes can lose all of the furniture or even have the house damaged from flooding? But you have a Prime Minister who is so mum, does not feel that he has to address these issues. And you have a country who, by their silence as well, are allowing the government to feel that that behavior is acceptable. Well, I have said that as long as there is breath in the bodies of the members of Parliament and the members of the Barbados Labour Party, we will stand in defense of this country and the workers. That is why people wonder whether they have been sold out. Because people feel that how can you abandon the cause before the cause starts? How can you abandon and say that you will not take any action and nobody will start to get laid off yet? And once they start to get laid off, you realize that all kinds of breaches taking place that would now be ordinarily be the subject of industrial action or industrial commentary. But when you do that and you have silence and then you have stories like you read in the newspaper today, you leave people to wonder what is really going on. And I say no more than that. You ask yourself, the board chairman and the board members, are they not Barbadians too? Do they not see that you can't keep spending more money at the Transport Board than you're earning? That you can't keep spending more money at the National Housing and still take on extra workers when you couldn't pay the ones that you had? Are they not Barbadians too? And you have now to ask yourself, who will stand for Barbados? And those who say, man, and they whisper, and they call, and they tell you, you're doing a good job, continue. The Labour Party doing a good thing, continue. I can't come out because I'm negotiating a contract with the government. But I have to ask you now, take care that you end up getting a contract and losing a business. Take care that you don't end up winning a contract and losing a business when the whole falls through the bottom. Take care for those who say, I don't want to come out because I'm fighting for the job. Take care that you don't end up keeping a job and can't buy nothing with the salary that you get from the job when the day comes. Because if the worst happens, that contract and that job will mean nothing unless we protect the defenses of Barbados. unless we protect the defenses of Barbados. Last Sunday at Ellerslie, I said that Sinclair continues to be the biggest burden on this economy. Prime Minister clearly feels that he is not. And the Prime Minister, in stubborn defense of Sinclair, keeps him there even in the face of an IMF report that starts by giving a scorecard of 0, by showing that nothing was done by the Ministry of Finance to correct the problems from as far back as their recommendations in 2011. Now that the report is available, the private sector, the unions, the church, the media have now to read it and take independent advice on it. And if at the end of the day, they believe that the direction of Barbados' fiscal and monetary policy is being led well by Sinclair, or going in the right direction, forget the characters now. Then fine. Let us press ahead as a country. Don't mind the Labour Party got a different view. We will allow the numbers in the country to dominate, because this is a democracy. But if when you read that report and you understand what Ryan Strawn and others have said, what Terence Farrell has said, what the IMF has said, what the IDB has said, what David Eswick has said, and what the Barbados Labour Party has said, can you in all conscience keep quiet and say that Barbados must continue in the direction in which it is going in the management of its fiscal and monetary affairs of this country? And I am not prepared to speak across the platform. Now that the IMF report is over and out, now that the Prime Minister has shown his hand to express confidence in the management of Sinclair's management of the economy, it is my wish and intention now formally to ask to meet with the unions and the private sector agencies of this country. And we'll start to do so formally, not as Mia Mottley, but on behalf of the leader of Her Majesty's opposition and the Barbados Labour Party, a party that garnered 75,000 votes last election, when the government garnered 78 or 79. And a party that says that in all conscience now we must stand and speak the truth to you. And while there are some things we will not speak on a public platform, we will speak them to you, as we will speak truth always to power in the privacy of our meetings and in the confidentiality of our meetings. And we do so because we are cognizant that time is running out on Barbados. And time running out on Barbados is not a nebulous concept. Time running out on Barbados means the likes of Delcina and others have less and less options to make ends meet, to eat, to pay light bills, to get access to water. Santi and Jeffrey, those of us in particular who have urban constituencies, who have very, very little opportunity to access food, will tell you what we mean. A man in Bush Hall or the Pine or Nelson Street, Chapman Lane, that wakes up with $5 in the morning in his pocket feels like a king because he knows he can get a small food. And he does not have to look for how to eat that day. And for those who feel, as some do in this country, that the Labour Party should keep quiet, oh, keep quiet, keep quiet. I say to you that those of you from the luxury of your cloistered environment who do not know what suffering is taking place on the ground, I beg you do. I beg you do. Come with us and appreciate that we are not crying wolf. This suffering is real. And if only a third of the people have gone home, and that is the suffering already, God help us when the government completes its plan of dismissals of workers in this country. And you know I speak as I speak tonight because paragraph 22, and Eswick referred to it on Thursday in his letter to the Prime Minister too. Could you believe that the IMF admitted, and I spoke to it Tuesday night, and Chris Sinclair dismissed it in the House and said, no, the IMF blessed them for the 3,000 layoffs as the right path. He said so in the House Tuesday night, Santia Jeffrey. He said so. And lo and behold, less than 24 hours later, the IMF report comes out telling the country, in clear terms at paragraph 22, that while the government was, let me read the thing, let me get it for you. I don't want to misquote it at all. The IMF said that the central government wage bill had risen to 10.3% of GDP in 2013, the highest in the Caribbean. The authorities mean government, opted in December for a major reduction in the public sector workforce, including employees at public enterprises, statutory corporations, effective the first quarter of 2014, January to March. You got to translate this language because it's using enough language. Sending a strong signal about their commitment to deficit reduction. Listen to the next sentence. At the time, the team, that is the IMF team, discussed the alternative of downsizing by attrition and implementing a wage formula to freeze the average wage per worker. This would have had the advantage of lowering economy-wide labor costs, which is needed to raise external competitiveness. Now, everybody in Barbados know what alternative means. The BLP is the alternative to a wicked and bad Democratic Labour Party government. In other words, you have a choice. And the IMF says here in this report, issued 24 hours or less after Sinclair denied it, that the government of Barbados was given an alternative to sending home Delcina, Ivor, and all the rest. But the government chose to do it. And Ryan will tell you that later on in the report, it makes the point again that the government chose to go this way so that they could send home enough at once up front. Even though the same report talks about the impact of the reduced spending when you take so many workers out of the workforce, how that reduced spending will now impact on the private sector and by extension government's tax revenue in the long run. Now, when a minister can have that option and not share it with the country, the unions must tell the people of Barbados in the meetings that they held at Bay Street whether Chris Sinclair put on the table that the IMF put an alternative to him. It wasn't only the NUPW that put an alternative on the table. The IMF said we put one too. So that the betrayal of this government doesn't end in last year's election, the first anniversary of which comes Friday. It would seem to me that this government has not been straight with the people of the country by telling them that even in December and January, they had put before them, before the IMF left here in the middle of December, when Chris made his statement to the country, an alternative to sending home 3,000 people. And then for you to come and play that you now want to ask the Labour Party to give you permission to cut people's wages? You mean that having sent home the 3,000 people, you now want to cut people's wages too? How wicked can a government be to send home 3,000 people and now want to ask me to agree to cut wages? Well, I say to you, my boy, that the people of Barbados did not give you a mandate to cut wages or send home people or lay off anybody or sell off any assets. And if you want to do any of those things, the only people from whom you can get that mandate is the electorate of Barbados by going back to an election. And this is not plain politics as some commentators would have you believe. Barbados cannot get out of this rut with a government that has a one-seat majority, that cannot even defend itself from looking stupid and making Barbados look like the laughing stock of the Commonwealth as it did on Friday. When a minister can tell a prime minister where to take it and how far to take it and what to do with it, and the prime minister has to take it, it tells me that the prime minister is putting the interests of the party first and not of the country. If the prime minister was putting the interests of the country first, he would understand that what was done on Friday was the biggest attack on cabinet government and collective responsibility since Barbados has become an independent nation. And if you now, having attacked the integrity of the court system, having attacked the integrity of the police by sending home the commissioner, you mean to tell me that you're even attacking the core of governance by attacking the cabinet and its collective responsibility? And that the only reason you remain silent in Barbados tonight and haven't taken no action is that you either like being dictated to by persons lesser than yourself, and you want to remain in a position at all costs, or you believe that the only way the Democratic Labour Party can survive as the government of Barbados is by shutting up your mouth, taking the licks, and keeping quiet. This is not what Barbados has been known for throughout the Commonwealth or throughout the world. And I must confess that I felt shame on Friday morning that our governance as a country had been reduced and devalued to a level hitherto unknown since independence. Could you see Grantley Adams, Errol Barra, Tom Adams, even Sandy Ford, and definitely not Owen Arthur? And for those who wonder, there is no way. No way. And at some point, when you come to lead a country, the first thing you do is to put country above party and self. And if only to protect the integrity of the government, the Prime Minister ought to address the country on what is taking place as attacks and incursions on his own government. Silence cannot suffice if we are to protect the integrity of institutions in this country. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is time that we put our cards formally on the table with the private sector and with the unions. It is time as well that we make it be known that time is not on our side. And that if it is the judgment that they are happy with the course on which Barbados finds itself, then be prepared for the consequences. But if you believe that we can avert the worst, avoid the worst, stop the suffering for the people who will be least capable of protecting themselves, protect Barbados' most valuable asset, which is its stability, then I say to you that the time has come for us to ask and for them to ask their own members, as we will ask our own members, who will stand for Barbados? Who will stand for Barbados that has been good to each and every one of us as Bajans? Who will stand for a Barbados that gave tens of thousands of people a chance in this country by affording them opportunities that other countries would never have afforded them? The board chairman, the board members, the ministers. How many of them could have received, including the private sector people, the kind of benefits and opportunities and stability that this country gave them? How many other countries could have given them that? And the Bajans tell you, let us bet. Who bet you? Well, Barbados bet on you. It is time for you to bet on Barbados. You heard Orlando tonight say that he was prepared to stay with those who couldn't pay him now, because when times were good, they were good to him. And it is now time for him to understand that he has to be good to them. And it is to that spirit that I call upon tonight. Not to the 3, 5, 4, 6, 7, 8, 900 coming out at nights to meetings, but to those who believe that by staying quiet, they can still get a contract. By staying quiet, they can still keep a job. By staying quiet, they don't appear to offend anybody. And I don't want you to offend or be rude to anybody, but speaking your mind can be done in a polite way. It doesn't have to be done in a rude manner. And I say tonight that, believe you me, if the judgment of the country is that they are happy with the fiscal and monetary direction of Barbados, and if that is our judgment by the beginning of April, go forward, because this is a democracy. But if between now and the beginning of April, especially with the estimates debate, there is the courage among the people of this country to say, before we reach the absolute edge of the cliff, I want to stand up and say that the direction is wrong. In October, we issued a petition, and just under 18,000, I don't have the exact number, but can give it to you, 17,000 and change, signed that petition to say they had no confidence in Chris Sinclair. I believe that the time now is for us to take the personality out and to say no, because the problem is no longer Sinclair. As I told you, once Sinclair is still there, the problem is the person who appointed Sinclair. The problem is the policy. The problem is the stubbornness of maintaining a policy that puts us in harm's way. And I say to you tonight that this country is running out of time. And unless the people of Barbados, and you too here, have a duty to spread the message now. Because those who are not here and who may not go on social media will get 30 seconds or 60 seconds on the news. Those who see it in the newspaper might see 6 inches in the paper. But in the meantime, Barbados is running out of time. And Barbados needs some good men and some good women to stand up in defense of it. I ask you to help me carry this message. And just as I meet formally with the institutions of this country this week and the next week asking for meetings, it is my wish and my intention. The National Union of Public Workers already indicated that they would meet with us during this week. and we will ask for meetings with every other. And just as we meet at your level, you need now to sensitize people now that you have been sensitized by the likes of those who have presented here to you that time is not on our side. And that if you want to avoid crying over spilt milk, then the time is now to stand up in defense of Barbados. Good night and God bless.